All right, traders, welcome to today's recap. This is Christian from Hertz Tribeca Trade Group, and today is August 21st. So, new public video out today because yesterday we did a member-only webinar where we went over the Tribeca Trade Group portfolio. We also did our normal chart form as well. So today will just be a normal rundown. So first things first, we managed to close, really kind of crazy when you think about it, right? Yesterday we closed on the absolute lows. It was one disclaimer there. I would say it was kind of low volume yesterday, although today's volume in S&P futures don't look like they were any more higher. So the back and forth movement continues. We'll see if this continues to keep traders kind of off their, I don't know, on their heels, I should say, maybe, because it seems like every time we get one of these days where we start to go in one direction, then the following day we get the other movement. Today does look like, from a technical standpoint, this looks like a pretty nice bullish engulfing bar, right? Meaning that today's price action engulfed the previous 2 days, which is normally a bullish signal. But again, this market seems to be kind of doing what the opposite you think it's going to do. Let's just look at the 1 hour bar for a second. It looks like we are trying to get above this level where we've had a lot of difficulty with. We've been talking about this, and again, if you're not a member, I tweet out a couple S&P charts to members where I just go over important levels to watch. Notice yesterday that we bounced. I think this is yesterday. We only fell right down to the top of value, which was support right at the close yesterday, and then right after the close, we started to kind of bounce from there, and we kept going, especially with the European Open this morning. So we're pushing again to this range. It definitely seems like there's some resistance here, right around this 29.35 level in S&P futures. If we could push through, we've got some nice things ahead of us. There's a virgin point of control way up there, but we need to kind of continue to push higher. So we had today a couple of today's events, and I'll talk about today's earnings. My goodness, what some really good earnings reports after the close today. But it seems like every day we're getting a little bit more risk taking in terms of long positioning. We're still seeing puts go up as well, especially on the index side. But it seems like we are starting to see a little bit more of call buying in single stock names, right? Like little names like ENPH, which has been continuous, but we're just starting to see, like today we saw a lot of Brazil calls. We saw some ASHR calls that went up, way far out of the money in those, but still, it seems like that it's active, right? There's a different feel, I think, from where it was, the option activity from where it was last week. A couple of days last week, I was showing a picture of like tumbleweed going across a desert in terms of visualizing that was the call buying, for a couple of days last week. So it's definitely changed. I do see some risk appetite out there. But I do think meshing that with the technicals, and I think we need to kind of continue to climb here. This candle that we're kind of developing right now in the 1 hour looks a little bit different than all these that were kind of stacked up. Really nice top of value that gave us that look last week, where we could not get above that. That was a pretty good signal. So that's what we got in store. So we'll see what the overnight brings us, but it would be really nice if I think we actually rally further. So we had the Fed minutes today. I kept on hearing this, and I'll spend a quick minute here, but I kept hearing people talking about it's Fed day today. It's not Fed day today. FOMC is when they meet and they make a rate decision, and then they have a press conference, right? So every press conference, every Fed meeting going forward, Powell said that he wants to do a press conference. That is not today. Today is just the Fed minutes. And the reason why I'm clarifying this, and if you know this, and if we've talked about this several times in the room today, but there's a big difference between them releasing what happened 3 weeks ago versus actually deciding whether or not to cut or increase rates, right? So again, the reason why I'm spending a minute here, because it seems like there's a lot that are just don't know the difference. But the Fed minutes all they're doing is giving you some of the meeting notes which is nice, right? To kind of see where they were at, but that's 3 weeks ago. There's a lot that's changed. We had a couple days where everybody was talking about the inverted yield curve. We had a couple days where everybody was talking about recession. We've had some poor economic data that's come out in Germany. This is all what's happened since the last Fed meeting. So it's really like you really weight this as very small. And again, it's not a Fed day. I kept hearing, "Oh well, we've got the Fed tomorrow. We've got the Fed tomorrow." The Fed was not meeting today. So that doesn't happen for a couple more weeks. The important thing for the week, and I don't know, maybe you could argue whether or not it's important, is Powell speaks on Friday. Like, he gives you new information. So again, if you ever like, I'm always here to kind of answer questions about this stuff, but it's important to kind of know what happens, because some people are just like, well, I'm just going to sit on my hands today because the Fed's meeting, and like, no, they're not meeting today. So anyway, just a couple. That was probably more than a minute on that, but we did have that today. It sounds like what they were saying, the takeaway from it, they have some Fed governors that sound like all they wanted was a mid-cycle adjustment and to be done, and then you have a couple other ones who sound like they want to go ahead and cut rates further. So there's some indecision within the Fed itself. All right, so let's go. Let's talk a bit about a couple names that reported earnings. Splunk is up pretty nicely, up to 137 right now. Looks like there was one version point of control. How crazy is this? That it sold, the initial reaction, somebody sold this thing down to 118. We've seen this a couple times now on these earnings reactions where the whoever's doing this, whether it's an algorithm or something, is getting it really, really wrong a few times. So Splunk is coming off the highs here. I don't know if the earnings call started, but a couple other reports. Keys looks pretty good. This is the one that I played for earnings, so I have to wait till obviously tomorrow because I have a call spread. If I had outright shares, I would probably, or outright calls, I would probably be looking to hedge it. This could get interesting for Keys because notice there's no version point of controls up there because we're actually past all-time highs at this point. So Keys could get really fun because there's nothing. There's no resistance ahead of it if it stays where it is, but it's got to stay where it is all the way to the open tomorrow, which is wishful thinking. Also, SNPS synopsis. This is actually a really nice looking chart going into this. Wow, they've come back and they're flat. Look at that. So they did come back. Splunk is coming back as well. Let's see. JWN was another one. That's actually coming off a little bit, but they're still up to $29. Be decent short interest on there. So a couple nice earnings beats, and I think this the market a little bit better in terms of that. I also just wanted to mention credit spreads. Sometimes people gets a bunch of headlines when things start to go bad, but when things start to kind of revert, sometimes you hear crickets, right? Nobody talks about, it's all about like grabbing the most, the most eyes and the most headlines. But once things start to come off, so this is what credit spreads look like. I think again, this is important for me to look at, or one of the reasons why I look at it is because when there's trouble in the market, it usually shows up in the fixed income market first. It's a much bigger market than equities. So this has got IEI, which is short-term treasuries. It's got this about close to the same duration as HYG. That's why I don't do TLT, and that's actually the lowest levels since we saw back here. So it is starting to move down, right? So it did get to, just a few days ago, it got to the high, the widest, as they say, for credit spreads in 2019, but it's coming off pretty decently there. So another thing that I look at is, of course, is the VIX. The VIX closed today all the way down to 1580 and now broke the 200-day moving average. So we've been talking about how this wasn't really complete. I actually drew a little bit of a triangle pattern in here. The one observation that we made a couple days is that we made a lower high. So we're now back to 15. So I think risk is starting to kind of come out of the market. What you kind of have to, where my mind kind of gravitates to is, do we really need a bunch of rate cuts? I guess that really depends on what's going to happen with this trade war. If the trade war is going to stay present, then probably it would be good to really have that Fed dovish to kind of minimize the trade war. Otherwise, if the trade war, if they start to really delay it or just push it out in terms of further tariffs, I don't know. Do we really need any more rate cuts? I don't know. Something to think about. I just wanted to mention one other thing in the S&P chart. I talked about those short-term levels. Is there anything else that you notice that's a little bit different in the S&P chart, other than we talked about bullish engulfing, but what about down here? Right, looks like we actually have an MACD. We're working on an MACD crossover right where we need it. So I think that's pretty instrumental. The last time that we got one of these, an MACD crossover, it you know it was pretty good results, and it's kind of occurring around the same point as we saw back in the middle of June. So hey, I don't think that we're completely out of the woods yet with that Powell speech in front of us, but I think the market is starting to lean to the upside after this spell that we had, right? So that's a story there. I mentioned. So what did I do today? Just to go over the performance. These days where we gap up, and I do make jokes in the trading room. I've been talking about like on days where we gap up. It's pretty much like go and feed the ducks if you like. Take profits on the open, and then you can kind of rest. And if the market kind of comes in again, then you can kind of even if it's not all the way back, but if it just kind of sells off like it did a little bit this afternoon. But you could see here, right? If you put your eyes over to percentage change for the day, excuse me, not here's percentage for the day, which you could see Q's finished up 89 basis points, SPY finished up 80, Diamonds 90, TLT tried to rally back today, came back to almost to around unched, or may have actually gone positive, but it did finish down. But so looking at all these gold, bonds, small caps, Qs, they didn't. None of these moved more than 20 basis points past the open. So there wasn't really a lot of trading in the indices. I think there was a couple decent moves that happened in single stocks, but for the most part, like this is not a day trading day, just like I think 2 days ago was as well. What outperformed the best? Actually, utilities right at the end of the day. And I think utilities may have made a new 52-week high. So the utilities are breaking out. We've been talking about this chart. I own just a very little bit of XLU calls. I own the December 63s. I also have this position in the Tribeca Trade Group tactical portfolio. I'll talk about that in just a minute. But other name, there's a handful of names. BX made a 52-week high today. ENPH, which I mentioned that we've seen calls. I mean, unreal. Some of these areas that are just breaking out. Look at Shop, which I traded a little bit of Shop yesterday. I didn't own any today. I took it off, but up another 4%. I mean, so pretty crazy, right? Monday, the software group was a little bit, some names were a little bit weak. I own Coop. I took some off here because my target all along was going to be top of value. So, doing exactly what I planned to do in Coop was take profits at that top of value and then hold the balance to see if we can get a 52-week high with this one. I'm also long some Team. Team didn't have that great of a day, but it did move, as great of a day as Shop. But so maybe I chose incorrectly because we were looking at a bunch of these names yesterday. Team TTD, and this TTD looks pretty good. Looks like it could have more to go. Waking up a little bit after earnings. Okta was another name that was super strong today. Nice bullish engulfing yesterday and beautiful follow through up 4%. So it's amazing these software names, they continue to kind of come back after they have a little bit of digestion or dips. And we've seen that time and time again. And you could see that was also one of the top movers. So again, where the averages didn't move at all. Home builders also did pretty well. The energy and oil names, they continue to kind of it seems to be the same situation as far as I can see, where any little rebound gets sold. These were the in a strong market. These were your underperformers for the day. It looks like OIH was flat for the day, if that's right. The FANG stocks look like they were a little bit weak. I guess they came back a little bit, but you could see Facebook was actually right on the day. So was Netflix. So that was not where the strength was today. I think it was mainly software. Don't forget Salesforce reports tomorrow after the close. Other names that had so you can see very little trading for me today. I added some PAGs that worked well today. Not a big position. Again, I'm not really taking big positions right now, but PAGS finished up 5%. I think we talked about that in yesterday's uh, chart forum webinar. I was looking to get this, after it bounced pretty nicely on, or, had a nice move on earnings, kind of came back and settled in, and then I bought it this morning when it was right around flat for the day. In terms of option activity, yeah, a lot of EWZ. So this is kind of interesting. I did not take this position today. It was up 2.6%, but this in PBR. So you could use the 200-day moving average. Somebody said to me on Twitter, which is really funny, they're like, sooner or later this 200-day moving average isn't going to work anymore and things are really going to fall apart. Yeah, that's fine because what you do is you put your stop below, it doesn't have to be a hard stop, but as long as you're disciplined trading, I don't know, that comment doesn't make any sense to me. You could sell it if it breaks the 200-day moving average, you sell. That's kind of how it's supposed to work. You don't just watch it go below the 200-day moving average and hold. you do something. Another name that we saw besides these two, which I thought is also a pretty nice signal is, even though it had an inside day today, which I don't love, still was up almost 2%, was Planet Fitness. Real nice looking order, and again, use the 200-day moving average. And if it breaks that, as long as you're disciplined, you have a paper cut of a loss. But this was a nice looking trade. This is $240,000 in premium. So October 70 calls. I thought that when they reported earnings, they had good earnings, but maybe they said something bad in the conference call. But still, you're getting them back here. This VPOC is already taken out, and you could use the 200-day moving average. So that was my favorite trade of the day, I think, in option activity, because ENPH, which we saw multiple times, for me, I think that name needs to come in. So you can kind of keep that in your back pocket, that there's been a lot of institutional price action there, interest, but I would wait for a little bit of a pullback and then kind of get involved. But you try not to forget about that type of order. IWM, there's two-way flow. There was calls bought. I think there was also some puts bought here. IQ, there was puts. ALXN, there were some calls today. PTD looks like there was some more interest, even though it gapped up. I mentioned ASHR. I think they traded over 40,000 of these. Again, pretty far out of the money stuff, but maybe somebody thinking, hey, maybe they make some progress on a trade deal. Who knows? What else? Last topic, and then we'll end the end of day video. Here is so I'm really excited about getting this going. You can see I've got a whole bunch of colors in here. We struck this as of Friday. I set these stocks up over the weekend, and so far it's outperforming a little bit. This is in the very beginning. This is just a couple days, but I've got the symbols hidden so you can't see them, so that you actually have to subscribe to this if you're not a member. But so what I will be doing, as I've kind of been mulling over how to do rebalances with this, which is on Motif Investing, which is really, really cool. If you're not familiar with their site, check it out. But you could follow somebody's portfolio, and then if they rebalance it, you'll get an alert that they're rebalancing it. And then you can, I guess, click a button that will basically give you the ability to go ahead and follow what they're doing, which I think is pretty cool. But yeah, so I've got targets laid out as well as stop prices. So prices all above the stop prices. I only have two names that were down since we struck this thing. Oh no, this one's actually up. That must have flipped today, so I could take that off. But this should be in light green. But yeah, we've got a lot of names. This one's up. This is an ETF, and it's up 6%. Beautiful. So I know which one this is. This is the solar ETF, which I'm happy to tell you. But yeah, we've got some names that are decently over 2%. So anyway, that's going to be kind of my project going forward. And what I'll do is I'll either rebalance this on Friday or Monday, depending on, I probably want to do my review over the weekend and then on Monday rebalance it. So I think that's how that's going to work. Once a week, because I do want to make sure we're hitting targets, and I don't want to do 10 rebalances a day every time one of these hits a profit target. But yeah. So anyway, if you have any questions about that, you can email me. That's it for today's video. Have a great night, everybody, and see you tomorrow.